Technology, the act of inventing stuff or concepts that either lets us do existing things better or lets us do things that we couldn't do before, or sometimes even both. Technologies can range from practical things like wheels, bows, sails, engines and robots, or things you can poke and go, yes, this is a wheel, it do be round mostly. And of course, technologies can also apply to innovations in the field of civics, philosophy or government. The latter is a bit more of a controversial statement. For example, is feudalism an innovation of government over despotism, a natural progression of an anarchist community, or is it a fundamental state of humanity that we regress to in unenlightened times? Those are all wonderful questions. You are more than welcome to go debate them or think about them, but an amazing reality today is I don't care. I'm going to class all political, scientific, civic, organizational and theoretical developments, whether the invention of the stirrup, to the romantic art movement, to the notion of humanism, to SQL databases and large language learning model AIs, all of these things are technologies. So how do Paradox Interactive games, all taking place with the scopes of centuries, if not millennia, deal with technological progress within them? Right then, before we get into that, let's just get some of the usual stuff out of the way. A like would be appreciated if you haven't already, and a subscription would be amazing. I recently clicked on Austria and was bewildered to see they actually have more force limited game start than I have subscribers. A frankly unacceptable state and one that has to be addressed. So if you haven't already subscribed, your subscription would be appreciated. But enough self-shilling, let's get into Crusader Kings. Now we will cover 3, I do promise, but I want to briefly mention Crusader Kings 2 technology. The technology in Crusader Kings 2 is weird, but it has to be. Unlike a lot of other titles where you play the spirit of a country, in Crusader Kings 2 and 3 you don't. You play as a person, or in a broader sense, a dynasty. As such, a traditional implementation of technology would be something like Saxony has infantry technology 4, which seems fine, but it falls apart very quickly, as Crusader Kings tags are very dynamic, which is a good thing to be clear, so titles get created, changed and destroyed all the time. Instead, Crusader Kings 2 adopts a province-level based technology system, which frankly I have to commend. It's certainly a neat idea and comes with a decent chunk of advantages. For one, tying technological progress to provinces demonstrates a very decentralized nature of the period. After all, if you invent a new technology in London that enables you to build, say, Barracks 3, that doesn't mean your holdings in Ireland also figure that out immediately. Technology needs to spread, and this allows you to have an almost natural system of innovations spreading around to neighborhood provinces. It means that, ironically enough, passive technological spread also becomes a really strong modifier, as in the long run it can be the difference between most of your realm having heavy infantry technology 2 or heavy infantry technology 4. Regarding the technologies themselves, they are uninspired to say the least though. Some technologies can represent genuine breakthroughs, namely of course Legalism 3, which gives you primogeniture and hence makes the game a lot easier to play, and sure, Majesty 5 also does stuff, and Military Organization 3, which lets you not take the pagan defensive attrition penalty if you are an organized religion. But these kinds of breakthrough technologies are far and few in between. I understand this game takes place basically from the end of the Dark Ages quote-unquote for Europe, and proceeds into the Renaissance, hence technological progress takes place in a point of history where Europe did very little in the science department. But come on, you're ignoring the Islamic Golden Age. Europe still made technological advancements in agriculture, metallurgy and architecture, and of course the rest of the world happened, looking at you, India. With that said, that's not the only criticism I have. Since your capital is what mattered for quote-unquote checking your technology level, if you ever lost your original capital province due to succession, conquest, or a myriad of other things that can happen to you during your Crusader Kings game, well, goodbye to a lot of your innovations. Now, it can be a good thing moving your capital around to take a bunch of techs using your tech points, but in the short term it can be quite crippling in a weird way. If we move our capital from London to Kent, do we just forget how to primogeniture? In Crusader Kings we do, and when it happens to the AI, and Lord knows the Emperor of the Romans loves to move the capital from Constantinople to Cyprus, sorry Sardinia, sorry Crimea, sorry back to Cyprus, oh and we are now based in Serbia, yeah you get the point, it can get a bit wacky and not in a good way, especially considering how much the AI struggles with actually ever returning the capital to Constantinople. So with that said, does Crusader Kings 3 improve on the situation? Well, yes. I haven't seen much or frankly any complaints about the Crusader Kings 3 tech system, and I do think in fairness it is reasonable to call it an outright improvement. Technology is now tied to your culture, and technological progress isn't entirely dominated by how smart the guy in charge of the capital is. Now it's based on the average development of your culture's provinces, and how smart the guy is in charge of the capital as well as your primary culture. Scholar Kings rise up, but not too loudly, we're in a library. Anyway, tying technology to culture is smart, as for one, it directly incentivizes forming hybrid cultures or even adopting foreign cultures to grab their innovations. Maybe a bit too much, I'm looking at you Tarkus and your 15 hybrid cultures in a lifetime average. He's really out there multiculturalism maxing in the 11th century. But anyway, outside of that, innovation, a rather strict progression lock on technologies based on ages, so you can't really rush primogeniture for example, or rush better siege technology is good, as being ahead of time is still rewarded, but you're not allowed to say we'll launch the space shuttle in 1370. Looking at you, every single Civ game. Frankly though, it keeps technologies still a lot more character focused, dare I say, as they're still culturally based instead of nation based, but I do think it is a strict improvement, and frankly Crusader Kings 3 on release had this technology system, and outside outside of small odd touch-ups here and there, the tech system in Crusader Kings 3 arrived complete and remained good to this day, so only praise here. Another day and another win for Crusader Kings 3. They avoid the pitfalls of a technology system which is spend 100 science as a nation to research the wheel, which certainly many other games have done before, and they made a pretty unique system as well as implementing the system quite well, in an environment that makes sense for the time, and most crucially in a way that enhances gameplay, and to top everything off, is fun. Crusader Kings 3 sets our bar very high. But with that, we move on to the early modern period, towards the Renaissance, and of course towards EU4. EU4. It has been described as many things. It's a mechanic spaghetti, where if you're playing as the British, and you enter the 16th century, and hence have a major conflict between Parliament and the monarchy, well, make sure you don't build a university in Cairo, because that university in Cairo gives you monthly government power, which is meant to boost the Egyptian modernization system, but the British Parliament versus Crown conflicts are also coded as a government power interaction, which basically means if you are the British and you build this university, well, it's over for Oliver Cromwell in the 1600s. Now, I love this game, but technology in EU4 isn't just one system. It's three systems that vaguely interact with each other, and much like a dysfunctional family, they only interact on Thanksgiving and every other Christmas. The three systems in question are, of course, 1, the actual technologies themselves, powered by the monarch points, aka your ruler's personal collection of cool swords, birds, and bits of paper. 2, the institution system, which starts by trying to give the Europeans a buff, but by the 1550s decides it can no longer be bothered to do that, and just kind of exists as another chore for the player. And of course 3, the technology group system, which unlike the institution system, actually systematically discriminates against the Europeans until the late game, at which point the Europeans get a win button. This statement is mostly true unless, of course, you are in the high American tech group, in which case congratulations, you get the win button automatically, or you're in the American or African or Aboriginal tech group, in which case congratulations, you have a lose button now. I find it even more telling that the tech group system is the unloved and neglected child of EU4, since the latest DLCs all added ways for non-European countries that were relevant to get the European tech group. No, seriously, Russia gets a mission to get Western instead of Eastern technology, the Ottomans get a disaster, since we're now taking a leaf out of the Ambenar playbook, I guess, and declared that disasters are content, and of course Egypt, which is a Tech 18 non-NTAG, an already absurd statement if you know what that means, but an absurd country made even funnier because it has a special government button which can be supercharged with that university in Cairo we mentioned earlier to give you Western units ahead of time. Look, we mentioned the Cairo University. Woo, check of gun moments, I'm a real YouTuber now. Anyway, yes, to call the EU4 technology system a mess would be the equivalent of saying that the Holy Roman Empire had some unusual government structures. So let's attempt to dissect it. Firstly, the technologies themselves cost monarch points, which are spent on plenty of other things, but come from a base generation rate, advisors, and your leader's competence. If you're behind in institutions, namely you are past an arbitrary date, and you don't have an institution, those technologies cost more, and these technologies can unlock new units depending on your technology group, as well as unlocking buildings and boats. But unlike military units, naval ships designs or cannons or courthouses, and actually every single church in the world, yes, all of them, they use a universal template, which means your tech group doesn't impact anything like that. It only impacts your fighting units. Anyway, yeah, institutions are weird. They're relevant enough to be annoying, but not frankly difficult enough to stop you building a technological utopia in Kenya if you really wanted to. At the same time, yes, institutions are crippling if you're, for example, in South America or Australia, but let's be honest, if you're playing inside those regions, you have bigger issues to contend with than you need to spend some monarch points to develop the rebirth of Rome from thin air. I do love the implication, of course, too, that if you're just chilling in Madagascar, for example, and you want to invent pikes, you can go do it, but no, someone in Europe, whatever that is, decided that it's time for Rome to come back. You have no idea what Europe is, or Rome for that matter, but congratulations, due to those innovations, your technology is now more expensive. But don't despair. If you develop your provinces by letting your local ruler invest some of his paper, birds, and swords into the ground, well, you'll also figure out what Rome is and how it's been reborn. You won't, of course, gain vision on Rome or Europe or anything, but congratulations, you can now get your pikes at a normal price. It's a mess of a system, which is a shame, as the fundamental concepts of technological groups or institutions that spread throughout empires, or even the technologies themselves, which sure only split into 3 categories, but tend to have a very impactful breakpoints like Miltech 4, Miltech 15, Diptech 23, or Admintech 17 to name a few, or for example even the manufacturing techs at 11. Yeah, I can keep going. The fundamentals are unironically there and great, but it has too many things really going on, and mastery of the system involves knowing what actually matters and what can be ignored. And on that somewhat bittersweet note, let's move on to Hearts of Iron 4. Out of all the Paradox titles covered today, Hearts of Iron 4 certainly has the closest base technology system to a conventional strategy game. Countries exist and have science slots, and they can use those slots to research technologies. These technologies range in anything from better gun to kill enemies of the state, to better factory to make a gun better, or gun but boat, and of course our greatest, newest innovation, gun but in plane. In the older versions of Hearts of Iron 4, we used to also have gun, but big boom, and how to use gun, all included in the technology tree. But innovations in gunnage have moved to the doctrine research tree, away from the scientists, meaning that military doctrine is no longer a science, sorry Clausewitz. And of course, the addition of special projects have also moved radar, nuclear weapons, and other cool bits of science like mini submarines away from the tech tree into a more specialized environment. I think the Hearts of Iron 4 system is fine, right? I mean, yeah, it was originally a pretty basic go research things system, and yes, not having a lot of research slots substantially hurts smaller nations, for example, but I think that's okay from a game balance point of view. Greece should not exactly be able to restore Byzantium and then 3v1 the Allies, the Comintern, and the Axis without difficulty, and part of that difficulty is that they have less of a research budget than the big boys. With the Special Projects DLC, this has been made even worse for the smaller boys, as the lack of capacity to invest into special research facilities puts them even further behind. But frankly, again, I think that's fine. Bulgaria didn't exactly build nuclear weapons after all. I do like to complain about the naval design system. I mean, who doesn't? It's a fun thing to complain about. But if you care about Navy, it's a good system. Plane design system is cool too, and the one critique I do have is that it's annoying in every single campaign to go have to design your planes, your tanks, and your boats. But with copy-pastable templates here, if you're lazy and you want to use a generic default template, that's fine, you can just do that now. So compliments all around from me again. I think the Hearts of Iron 4 system initially played it safe but was functional, meaning that the Hoi4 tech tree arrived in a good enough state, and over time was reworked into something cool with, again, things like doctrines and specific designs. There's nothing too innovative or unique here, and not much more to say, so let's move on to our final topic, Stellaris, and leave Hearts of Iron 4 with the praise it rightly deserves. Stellaris uses a hidden tech tree. It inherits a Choose 3 technology system from EU4 because Stellaris is at its core unironically an EU4 overhaul mod with a fresh coat of paint, but that complaint aside, it's an obscured technology tree that pretends to be something fancy when it's basically a perma mild shuffle mode tech tree from Civ 6. Does it work? Yes, but it's a teaser for we could have had a cool system, and it doesn't do anything unique, cool, or honestly even interesting with the technologies themselves. Few technologies fundamentally change how you play. You get better lasers or better shields or better mines, and outside of only a couple technologies that unlock, for example, megastructures, well, not a lot of things fundamentally change how you approach a game of Stellaris. Let's compare this to, for example, Crusader Kings. Technologies in Crusader Kings feel more impactful. Unlocking cool siege weapons, new government types, or even new vassal contracts changes how you interact with the game. But in Stellaris, upgrading Laser Gun 4 from Laser Gun 3 just kind of seems sad in comparison. Speaking of comparisons, I'm going to bring up a game I've brought up quite a few times at this point, but it just makes sense here. Master of Orion 2, an ancient game which, with Master of Orion 1, aka just Master of Orion, did define the genre of space 4X strategy games. And despite Master of Orion 2 itself being released in 1997, technologies, especially the military ones, feel more substantial, as the core functionality of weapon types changes, and certain weapons have innate properties. Newer weapons are also not inherently better, but how this is balanced is that, for example, plasma guns are more advanced than laser guns. But laser guns, for example, take up, from the top of my head, 10 space. I don't think they actually take up 10 space, but I'm using this as a go-to example. As you research plasma weapons, your older weapons gain a level of miniaturization, which basically means you can, because of those plasma gun designs, make the laser guns more efficiently. Which, first of all, lets you customize those laser guns with extra upgrades that get fancier as you unlock more levels of miniaturization, for example adding point defense, auto fire, or heavy mount, and it makes the default space requirements that take on the ship smaller, so for example 8 space per laser cannon now instead of 10. What this means in practice is that you can shove more laser weapons onto your existing ships. It also means that a very powerful strategy inside of the game is actually rushing Merculite missiles, or the Tech 2 missiles in the game, as this unlocks the MIRV modification on nuclear missiles, the default missiles, making them significantly stronger, and MRIV early game nuclear missile rushes are very effective. Also, for another point of comparison, in Stellaris, Beam Weapon 4 is just better than Beam Weapon 3. However, in Master of Orion 4, plasma weapons, a tier 4 weapon, have the envelop property, meaning they damage all sides of the shield instead of the side that you hit, because yes, there's a tactical combat system, and shield directions matter. So if the front of your ship is damaged, you can turn around, and your back shields, which have not sustained that much damage, hopefully, are now exposed to the enemy. Meanwhile, Tech 3 neutron beams have a property where they kill enemy marines depending on the point of damage dealt. This means that if you have a ship boarding combat style, where you have some light weapons to soft arm the enemy and then board with marines, you don't actually want to upgrade to plasma guns, for example, as they lose the marine killing property properties and make your boarding actions harder. Now in Master of Orion 2, weapons also have a concept called dispersion, where if you fire a beam weapon from a longer range, it will lose focus and deal less damage by the time it hits. If it hits, of course. And this means, for example, plasma cannons are great for damage, but they suffer double the dispersion damage. So if you're building artillery ships that you want to stay at the back of the engagement line, well, you're better off still running neutron weapons, as the neutron weapons don't have the penalty to dispersion that the plasma weapons have. This is all cool. Where is this in Stellaris? How is ship tactical depth in Stellaris inferior to a game made for DOS? Not Windows, the DOS operating system. Like, just to be absolutely clear here, the game predates the universality of Windows, for crying out loud. Okay, it doesn't. Windows was originally made in 1985, but you get the point. When if you boot Master of Orion 2 today, it literally boots up a DOS emulator. Complaining about Master of Orion 2 being old aside, another thing that Master of Orion 2 did with their tech tree, which I think is really cool and I've seen no other game use, is a very unusual feature, namely the creative, uncreative, and default research options. See, when you research one of the tech options in front of you, for example, let's say I want to research the advanced construction technology, you pick from a list of 3 technologies. And in the case of advanced construction technology, you pick between automated factory, missile bases, or anti-missile missiles. As in, you pick one of those 3 options, and after you research the tech, you move on to the next tech, but you don't get to the other 2. The only way to obtain the other 2 is to trade it with someone who has researched it, steal it from them with spies, or capture one of their planets and hope to loot it. In the example I gave, automated factories provide substantial bonuses to your production capabilities. Missile bases are planetary defenses, which if you build, for the most part will protect you from most early game rushes and force your enemies into building significantly stronger fleets to overpower. And finally, anti-missile missiles are the best way of countering enemy missiles in the game, meaning that early game you can shut down someone else's missile build really effectively, especially cost effectively, and late game if someone is going to be making a missile build, they are the perfect counter. But if you don't take them pretty early on here, as it's an early tech, you won't be able to get there at any point without the aforementioned spying or any other methods. There are other dynamics at play here too. I mentioned the creative, uncreative races earlier, and creative races, for example, is a very expensive trait, but it gives you all the techs when you research them, which naturally is quite strong, but the creative trait itself doesn't directly boost your research speed, making it a massive early game liability, while uncreative is a very fun gambling approach to the game, as it means the game auto-rolls all the tech options for you, and can be used as an extra challenging approach or a free negative if you're not planning on teching a lot in the game. At heart, I talk about this because all of this depth around technologies was achieved in 1996 on average PCs. We're talking about computers with 16 megabytes of RAM, yes, 16 megabytes, not gigabytes of RAM, graphic cards that had 2 megabytes of memory if you had a decent one, 1 megabyte of memory if you're running the budget option, and 4 megabytes of memory if you were rich. And while yes, in 1996 we did just get fancy new storage options, the average total disk space was hitting a stunning 1 gigabyte of storage, so a modern computer with 64 gigabytes of RAM can hold like 50 1996 computers inside of their RAM. Of course, Stellaris had its perks too. The government, civic, and ascension options, for lack of a better word, are genuinely expanded and amazing, and the smallest Stellaris galaxy is bigger than the largest Master of Orion 2 galaxy. But I say all of this because all of these technological innovations are possible, and here in the realm of space warfare and combat, Stellaris is at best a letdown, and I will leave it at that before I get even more sad. But indeed, I think Crusader Kings 3 has my favorite implementation of technologies within the games, in both a uniqueness and gameplay point of view, with the EU4 being a complete mess in this regard, and while enough of a mess to earn a negative overall ranking, it's still at least a functional enough system sometimes. Hearts of Iron 4 puts in a solid workhorse performance, making consistent improvements, and while not shocking with anything radical, it's still a respectable performance. And Stellaris concludes the video with disappointment over what could have been. That all being said though, that is all the time I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching, with a special thank you to all my channel members, especially Ark, Solar, W Haste, Lemon, Star72, Lord Zendikar, Nick Fassbender, Manhattan, Nick Huss, The Awesome Rabbit, Best for Gaming, Grandmill Flavia, Sov, Mobkiller, Anthony35, AC Napo, Glorious Leader, Frankie, Yukata, Danre, Private Claw, Jack, Malvi, Conspiracy Pizza, and La Barule.